Quiero ser diferente. Pero no puedo.
All right, we are back today on Play It Forward. We have Evelyn Lorena, filmmaker, actor. The film is Gabriella. Evelyn, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. I'm actually really excited because I saw a lot of the interviews and I feel like this is a really cool opportunity.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Somebody is watching. That's great. And it is you. Evelyn, can you share a little bit about yourself, background, how you came to filmmaking, and then set up Gabriella?
Yeah. So my name is Evelyn Lorena. Hi, everybody. I It's been kind of a chaotic journey, I think, but basically, I guess I started as an actor and I'm still an actor, but I got to a point where I was a little bit concerned with how much things were like stereotypical all the time for like what they would offer not only myself but my colleagues in terms of the Latino community. Um, and I got, I've always been drawn to the idea of people's inner lives. Doesn't matter who they are, whether they're, you know, somebody who doesn't have a home to the richest person in the world. Like I always, um, class and race never have interested me as much as like what's inside of a person.
Yeah, the
And that
story.
kind of,
Everybody's
yeah,
got a story.
right. And that inspired me, I think, or that's actually why I also wanted to be an actress, because I always was curious what it was like for other people to be themselves.
Mhm.
And I always, even as like a little girl, would ask people questions about themselves and wanting to know more. And, I even was like the lead peer mediator when I was like in first grade because I wanted to understand more about people's dynamics and relationships. And so um, I I always have just like wanted to have more curiosity about the human condition. So
Yeah.
that was why I started becoming an actor as well. And also because I love stories. Like I just I love the idea of like mythology over, time. It's one of the reasons I think things like, Star Wars or Jurassic Park, they're so classic and timeless because they have like a mythology behind them. Anyway,
Yeah,
getting
sure.
tangential,
No, no,
but
no.
it just I think for me it was, like I said, being kind of disappointed with the options, or it wasn't even so much the options because obviously you can play so many different characters and that's fine. But I think it was more the narrowness of those options where it was more based on actually, this is how we see you versus, hey, we're giving you options. Because sometimes, like I said, sometimes there does need to be, a gangbanger or like a gangster or something in a story. But if that's like the extent of it, because that's how you view people, then it dehumanizes a whole section of people.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was interested in, hey, if the way that we're viewing a lot of, Latino stories is a bit already dehumanized, I was like, how do we bring humanity to like particularly an immigrant story that gets kind of washed away or, reduced in its story capacity. So that's kind of like that was the first seed, I think, for Gabriella. And then it just evolved from there into many different things. Like personal freedom was really important to me because of what I was going through at the time. And there's just a lot of layers, I think, that were incorporated into the story. But the
Mhm.
initial impulse was how do we bring a story that's more human for this um, person with this set of circumstances?
Yeah, well, in terms of the set of circumstances, thank you for sharing all that.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's, very relevant to artists. Artists become artists because, they're empathic and sympathetic and have a desire for connection. through
I guess that's what that
story.
is, isn't it? I guess it is empathy.
I think so. I
Like
think
describing it
so.
very long-windedly.
No, and that's the way it works. That's the origin of it is, childhood story. And oftentimes artists have felt marginalized in some way. I mean, it's a very common story that experience has helped them become more um, able to go inwards and be introspective and be so around others as well, having compassion. And so, Gabriela starts out with a story of a young Mexican American girl, Latino girl,
Guatemalan, yeah.
Guatemalan. Okay, thank you. So there you go.
Good.
Latino girl. And she's from Guatemala, and she is seemingly American. You would think she's first generation, but she's not, because she does not have legal papers, I believe, right? There's that scene there. And so she already is, and she discovers that for herself as a part of the process. She didn't necessarily know that seemingly. So she is kind of torn between her own dreams and aspirations and her mother's sort of desire for her to have a secure life and what that looks like. And so, Gabriella is facing the challenges between going her way, going her mother's way. Which way does she go? What does she do? And how does she pursue life? And she's, the theme of freedom is really one of the most prevalent in the film. And you said you were dealing with some own personal limitations to freedom. So, around how that story got put together with the mother and the daughter relationship and that kind of fidelity and loyalty to the family, yet the desire to be true to yourself, those circumstances, what was going on in your life that inspired that script and theme exploration?
Um, I mean, I think it's talking about, like we were 5 minutes ago about archetypes and mythology and stuff like that, is that I find the concept of like identity like really fascinating in terms of like every single person goes through that, I think. And for me, I think it was like a perpetual journey that I've been dealing with my whole life, basically, where it's like, who do I live for? You know, trying to find, and this could have just been another reason why I became an actor, is because I always felt I could code switch very quickly in whatever environment I was in. So I could become this person and this person and that person, but I never felt like I had a stable home spiritually within myself.
Mm,
Um, and so while that made it great for acting, I felt like for myself, sometimes there was a lot of chaos internally because of that. Um, but when I would tell other people about it, everyone's like, yeah, I always feel torn about what the right thing to do is. And I think that's kind of the universal journey for people. It's like, who do they become in this world? Who do they, what is their purpose? What are they, because part of your identity becomes also your purpose. You know what I mean?
mm,
So I feel like a lot of that, I wanted it to be universal for
mhm.
people just to understand that there is always this struggle, but that hopefully by the end, and I kind of wanted to make that last moment a little anticlimactic, because that's kind of how it feels in real life. Like it's not
Mhm.
like, as much as I love,
You got it figured out.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and as much as I love things like Star Wars and Jurassic Park, there's not this like, at least in terms of art, for me, I guess, and maybe this just hasn't happened to me yet or something, but I feel like the moments that we have growth are little moments. They're not like these moments of like, I got it, everything's good now, and we're moving forward. Like, here's the landmark. I mean, sometimes it happens that way, right? I guess in the sense of like, if you have a very traumatic bookmark thing happen to you. But in general, I feel like for me, it's been these little moments where I realize something and I'm like, right, now I can sort of begin this direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's kind of how I wanted even the ending to kind of
Yeah.
play out a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I guess to answer your question about where the freedom stuff comes from, um, I guess just from that, like the idea that like so many of us are always trying to be free or break free of expectation or, try to be ourselves, but we think the freedom is coming from out there, and I see
Right.
that even with like what's happening right now with the elections and stuff is like, I think everyone's always looking for an exterior savior. You know what I mean? Like this
Hmm.
person is the answer, this person is the thing, this institution's going to save us. And it's like, those are supposed to be, in my idea, like supportive of what we're already doing for ourselves, but we have to have, and I think this is where my fascination with identity is like how much of that identity also, our own freedom is created
Right.
by our
Yeah.
own
Right.
narrative. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Sure.
so if you're always looking for external means, that's also contributing to this like lack of identity within yourself,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I wanted to sort of explore that for her because I think in the beginning of the story, I think she always thinks that if she's someone else, she'll get ahead. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like this idea of
Hmm.
like, if I
Yeah.
join this thing, if I join this
Right.
club, I'm
Right.
good. If
Right.
I do this thing, I'm enough.
Right.
If I do
Right.
this, if I do this, if I do that. And it's
Yeah.
like all these external hypotheticals
Yeah.
versus just saying like, hey, where you are is enough. You have everything you need and let's go forward from there. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's been a big lesson for me
Yeah.
throughout my life. Is like I've been in so many different environments where I have felt not enough. And I'm sure everyone feels that. And you just feel like, how am I going to navigate this? And part of me is recently has just been like trusting a lot of like, hey, if you, it's kind of like, it's a little bit reductive, but like you wouldn't be on this earth if you didn't have something to contribute. So you kind of like, for me, it sort of made me stop worrying about whether I was enough for spaces and just contribute what I have, you
Right.
know?
That's beautiful.
Um, yeah, so that's I
That's
think
very cool.
that's a long-winded way of saying that's
It's
where kind of
beautiful because it's a process. It's not long-winded,
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's definitely a process. I get the freedom, It reminds me of a quote Lisa, my wife, said to me the other day, "The only way out is in."
Yeah, yeah,
And that's the internal, mental, spiritual freedom that we create for ourselves, irrespective of the situation. Sometimes the external reality is easier. It's more supportive of that inner work, and sometimes it's not.
right.
But it's still, the inside, where we have consciousness, and then that kind of consciousness takes us back to identity. Like that is a part of our consciousness. Like how do we, religion is constantly exploring. That's, religion and philosophies, they are, kind of the same thing, and
Mhm.
they just have a different kind of definition for the origin story, but
Yeah,
they're exploring, psyche, Latin for soul, like who are we? What is our identity? And, I'm very into Hindu yoga philosophy, and, the Bhagavad Gita is,
oh yeah,
I am that I am, I am that. It's the unknowable, the unnameable. And that thing is not noble, but it is beable.
yeah.
And
My dad and I have these conversations a lot too, where I think my dad's a big inspiration in terms of like my spirituality, in the sense of like he's always sort of thought a little bit outside the box with this kind of stuff, and has always been drawn to different philosophies. He's not someone who's like, there's only one way to do something. He's always reading new ideas, new philosophies, new things, very curious. So maybe that's where I got some of my curiosity. But um, he was always like, question everything, and try to find new ideas to things. And I I feel like part of like, Gabriella's journey is trying to figure out why she is there. You know what I mean? Like she wants to know, and I don't mean like in like why are we here? Like I just mean like I think more of as if like a respite for the pain that she's feeling and the
yeah,
confusion. Um
What's the
I'm not
point
sure.
of being
I'm not
here
sure.
if it's
Yeah, I'm
so
not sure why I
painful?
was connecting those two things now.
Well, you were
Uh,
talking about,
anyway.
I mentioned it being beable and not
Oh, right.
versus
So
knowable.
yes. So my dad always used to say to me, people want to have things before they are.
Mm,
And I was like, well, when I was a kid, I was like, what?
right. Yeah.
But I understand what he's saying is that there's a sense of beingness that you have to come into things in order
Mm,
to then make this is getting a little metaphysical, but
let's do it. There's a place
getting
for it.
like, yeah, you you have to kind of have a sense
Yes.
of beingness of who you are in order to then make an impact in like physical,
Yes.
reality and have
Yes.
things and make an impact and all these things. But a lot of people think that you have to have the thing first
Right.
and then you become the thing.
Right.
And it's like, no, you have to go into something
Right.
being with belief and having,
Yeah.
this beingness about yourself,
Yeah. They're reaching for the fruit instead of walking
it-
towards the tree.
yeah, or
Yeah.
being the roots themselves and
There you
all
have
that.
it. Yeah.
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 Um,
Exactly.
and so I feel like that was really powerful, that a thing that my dad taught me that I'm now understanding a lot
Mm,
more fully than as a child.
that's awesome.
But I think that is relevant to the story of Gabriella because it's again, she's got this idea at the beginning of the story where it's like she's really mad. And I think she's mad also with her mother because she's like, why won't you just let me have this thing that will like solve my problems? You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Um, which is kind of funny because they don't want her. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
so it's just, and I feel like we do that too. It's like, you see people, I feel like toxic relationships are like really trendy on like Instagram now where people talk about them and stuff.
Mhm.
And it's funny because people will have these conversations in like the comment section and they're talking about how like they don't understand why they keep going back to this person, but they still want it. And I'm just like, yeah, it's a human thing, that we want something that we can't have and that clearly don't want us. And yet we're like, please.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of like, well, that'll fix it.
Yeah.
If only.
Yeah.
How did Gabriella and you in your own life come to the point where you are able to accept yourself and go inward and create that identity rooted in your own personal narrative?
I don't know. um, I I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to paint that ending moment like that, where it was kind of like like a kind of almost like a visceral understanding, because
Mm,
I still don't know how I've arrived where I am and whether I have full acceptance yet. There are moments where, you know, I get frustrated and I'm like, oh, why am I not like, you know what I mean? Like, I
mhm.
think that's like a human thing. Um, so I don't think that I have any kind of arrival at a moment or perfection in that regard. Um, but I think what I can say is that I think it's more about like the awareness of something. You know what I mean? Like if you're conscious of it, if you've had the moment, like for example, when Gabriella has it at the end or something, um, that you can then move forward in like that trajectory because you have the awareness of it. If you don't have the awareness of it, you're still in the same circle.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? So
That's
I think
yeah.
for me, it's always been a thing of how aware are you, or
Yeah.
and how much more aware every day are you becoming? You
Yeah.
know, that's what's important to me, I think, as like a person and also in storytelling. Cause like, you know, I think a lot of times in LA, and this bothered me a lot, um, is that you're often asked like what's next all the time, like what's next, and have all these projects and be ready. And there's a lot of like at the end of the day, it's very commercialized
Oh
sort of thing
yeah.
of your not only of your artistic identity but yourself. It's like
Oh
everything
yeah.
is
Oh yeah.
commercialized in that and like
Yeah.
it's commodified. Like you become commodified in that way, and
Yep.
that's fine for business, I guess, because people are competing against each other in some ways, but like, and you know, you have to have, you know, some edge on yourself. But I also think it's really dangerous because you're training people to not just forget, I guess, quality of what you're doing, because to me these things take time, but also the process and awareness of like what you're creating. Because
Sure.
for me, there are things in the story now that I'm discovering
Yeah.
2 years later
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
I'm like having conversations about that I
Yeah.
never originally intended, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like in
Yeah.
terms of consciously.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm like, all of these things are so layered and processed and everything. And if you don't even process them for yourself as an artist, I'm like, what are we
Yeah.
doing?
You're just wasting time. You're kind of
Yeah,
spinning
or
your
like, or
wheels.
you're just trying to get ahead. If the goal is to
Right.
get ahead, then we're doing great, you know. But if the goal is to like make art
Yeah.
and to like have create awareness and connection, I'd say that we're veering a little off center, you know what I mean?
The
Um,
thing with getting ahead that's tricky is if you always want more, it's never enough.
that yeah, it is.
So
It's true.
it's a tough place to put yourself. And I've been guilty of it,
Sure,
and
of course.
it's, not where I want to be, you know. And
Yeah,
I
and I think that that's what I mean is like I feel like I have those moments of awareness where I'm like, oh, you catch yourself and you're like, that's actually that's out of alignment. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Um, but
yeah,
I feel like we're encouraged in those cultures of the entertainment industry to kind of abandon that a little bit, and then you abandon some of the awareness because it's like somebody was asking me the other day, like, how do you know you're doing something wrong? And I was like, well, one, I think you have to have a strong kind of like ethical understanding of like ethics, first of all, which a lot of people don't, which that's a whole other story. But like, secondly, like you do get a little bit of like a red flag when something happens. And it's your choice. Do you ignore that or do you keep going? And if you ignore it, you're training yourself to no longer be aware of it. And then you don't have it after a while. And you
yeah,
don't think anything's wrong because you've already like trained the flag out. So
yeah,
for me, it's like when those flags go up for me or like those feelings inside, I'm like, whoa, let's just take a second and like, you know, and a lot of times I get ridiculed. Like I've had fellow colleagues where they're like rolling their eyes at what I'm saying or, you know, whatever. And it's painful for me because you don't want to ostracize yourself from your whatever, your colleagues. But at the same time, it's like, I guess for me, and this could just be from having gone to art school or something, and they just really drill into you like the integrity of what is happening. But like, I feel like why I'm sacrificing already so much for this particular career and you know view of life that if we're not going all the way with it and we're just doing it for your own vanity to like, you know, be recognized, then it becomes almost disrespectful in a lot of ways to me. And so then I just, you know, it's hard for me to continue down that kind of road, I guess.
yeah.
Um, I don't know how we got on the topic of artistic integrity, but it's just something that's important to me, I think, as like, and again, I hate talking about it to you in that way because then it starts to sound a little bit of like a pretentious exercise, which is what I don't want.
Well,
But
I don't hear
also,
that. I mean,
it's
I hear
also
somebody seeking
important.
truth and somebody living a
Yeah.
truthful life. So, and
Yeah.
you're,
And that's important to me.
passionate about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's important to me. And um, I can't tell you why it's important to me. Like I said, I mean, I'm sure there's lots of
I
roots
think it
there,
has
but
to do with identity.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'd say. I mean, looking back on the film now for yourself, what do
Mhm.
you see as the message and the meaning of it for you?
Um, I mean, I would hate to like steer people's, you know, perception of what they
Just for
like, but
you.
I'm
This is for
gonna,
you.
um, I guess for me, like when I watched the film the other day, there was like a sense of breathe, like relief, you
Mm,
know, like an exhale,
mm,
where, you know, this idea of you can move forward now.
mm,
You know what I mean?
mm.
And I think it put also just personally, I didn't anticipate this. Actually, one of my mentors did. So I'm glad that they, sort of encouraged me to not just make it, but also to be in it, because I think somehow, and like I said, I don't know how, but it exercised a lot of like
Mm,
previous parts of myself
mm, mm,
that
mm,
I think had been trying to reconcile itself.
mm,
And it just
mm,
sort of did it,
mm,
like,
mm,
I don't know, just in the magic of it.
mm, mm.
Because I wasn't consciously like, let me attack every single little, you know what
Sure,
I mean?
sure.
It wasn't like that. So I think for me, that put to rest a lot of those things, which is interesting because I don't tend to like to look at art as like therapy, but it just becomes it
Oh
somehow.
yeah, it's just
You
that's yeah, it's definitely every I've interviewed a lot of filmmakers and everybody has woven their story into it, and
Mm,
99% it's therapeutic, and
yeah.
that's the point to a big extent. What I loved in the message, a lot of your message, all of it, but the last, thing you said is being able to move on. And, I think there's some sort of synthesis that happens. The character's able to synthesize two perspectives that have been
Mhm.
conflicted, and
Yeah.
that allows for, a process of continuation. And I think that's, something that we can all relate to.
Yeah, and I feel like that I think what was more important to me in terms of the story was also how that relates on a larger scale, because I think in the Latino community, and this is something that was important to me, like I said, if you zoom out in terms of the greater community, is are when you say Latino, you're not talking about like one section of people. You're talking about, I mean, you know, how much Spain sort of was the conquistadors of
Yep.
so many different countries and so many different cultures, and how much of those things get lost in the diaspora, and how much people, change over time, and what are the new cultures that are coming out of like mixing with not just like American, but the people that the immigrants that come in, and there's just so many different points of view that need to be reconciled. And part of that,
Mm,
like even with that image at the end where she's holding her mother's hand, it's like the past or the
mm,
culture
mhm,
with herself and the future of,
mm,
the Latino community. That was very important, that image to me.
mhm,
um that you understand viscerally. It doesn't have to be like, here it is, but
mhm,
it's
mhm.
it's there, and within her, because that's what we're carrying, you know what I
That's
mean? And I
right.
feel that very in terms of like a responsibility to myself, where I'm like, whoa, you're not just carrying your life forward, you're carrying what your ancestors asked of you, and what they wanted for you, because I felt that very viscerally. Like one time I was going through something, and there was like a moment where I really understood that, where I was just like, we don't realize that we're on the shoulders of giants in some ways, you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
Because everybody's always putting forth so that their own family or their own personhoods have legacy in some way, and not just like in a vain way, but like in survival,
yeah.
and so that's kind of what I felt, where I was like, whoa, like we're here with like that kind of purpose too,
Yes.
um so I wanted like that last moment with her mother to have a little bit of like that behind it, if hopefully that comes through.
Evelyn, it's a great piece. The film is Gabriella. We've been talking to Evelyn Lorena, filmmaker, actor. You did a great job on the film. It's an outstanding piece, really well written, very nuanced, a lot of intricate plot points. And thank you so much for being on the show. Till next time, everybody. Bye, Evelyn. Thank you.